Can someone really die from laughter? Not in a movie, not in a joke, but in real life. And not just anyone. A king in the year 1410 during a quiet evening feast in Barcelona. A royal figure lay in his bed suffering from indigestion after eating a full goose. He summoned his favorite jester for amusement. The jester told a strange joke, and the king laughed and laughed, and then he died. This wasn't just any ruler. He was Martin I of Aragon, also called Martin the Humane, King of Aragon, Valencia, Sardinia, and Sicily, a respected monarch in Europe's late medieval age. But his bizarre end death by laughter has puzzled historians for centuries. Did he really die from a joke, or was there something more behind the laughter in this video? We're diving deep into this incredible yet forgotten tale. You'll uncover the real story behind King Martin's final hours, the strange joke that allegedly killed him, what modern science says about dying of laughter, why his death caused a royal crisis that changed European history. So stick around, because this is not just history, it's a mystery. Welcome to History Screen, where the past tells its tales. If you enjoy fascinating history stories told like never before, hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. Before his strange death ever made headlines in medieval chronicles, Martin I of Aragon was a powerful monarch, one whose name once echoed across southern Europe. He was born in the year 1356 in the royal house of Barcelona. His early years were shaped by the politics and turbulence of a fragmented Spain where kingdoms rose and fell constantly. But Martin wasn't the first in line for the throne. His older brother John I of Aragon ruled before him, and it wasn't until 1396, after John's sudden death, that Martin became king. But this wasn't just one kingdom. Martin ruled over a complex web of territories, the crown of Aragon, which included Aragon, Valencia, parts of Catalonia, and the islands of Sardinia and Sicily. Holding all that together took more than just military power. It took diplomacy, and that was Martin's strength. He earned the title Martin the Humane, not for being weak, but for his balanced, level-headed leadership. He was known for fairness, for settling disputes, for resisting cruelty at a time when cruelty was common. But in his final years, the king's body began to turn against him. He suffered from obesity and chronic indigestion, both serious issues in an age with little medical understanding. Some reports also hint that a plague was spreading in Barcelona during that time. Disease, poor health, and age were all closing in on him. While Martin still held power, there was one looming problem. He never saw succession. His only legitimate heir had died young. No new heirs came. Courtiers pressed him for a decision. But when the question finally came, who shall be king after you, Martin is said to have replied with just one word: Hawk. It meant this one or simply yes, but no one knew who he meant. There was no name, no plan. The future of the kingdom hung in silence. It was late May in the year 1410. King Martin I of Aragon was not well aged, and illness had started to wear him down. He had grown heavier in his final years and often suffered from digestive problems. That evening, the king had enjoyed a full feast, but perhaps he had enjoyed it a little too much. Among the many dishes brought to his table, one stood out: a whole roasted goose. Rich, greasy, and heavy on the stomach, Martin devoured it with pleasure. But by nightfall, he was in pain. He retired to his private chamber, struggling with severe indigestion. The palace grew quiet. His servants waited at the door. The king lay in his bed, uncomfortable and bloated, but still in need of distraction. So he called for someone who always lifted his spirits. His court jester, a man named Bora, wasn't just a fool in colorful clothes. He was sharp, clever, and quick with wit, just the sort of company a suffering king might need. When Bora finally entered the room, Martin greeted him with a simple question: "Where have you been?" And Bora answered with a straight-faced "I was in the next vineyard. I saw a young deer hanging by its tail from a tree. It was being punished for stealing figs. It was nonsense. Absurd even. But to King Martin it was hilarious. He burst out laughing, a deep, genuine laugh, the kind that shakes the whole body, the kind that comes when you least expect. I kept laughing and laughing. The joke wasn't especially sharp. It wasn't clever. By modern standards, But something about the image, a deer hanging upside down, punished like a thief, struck the king as impossibly funny. According to legend, Martin laughed so hard that he couldn't stop. Some say it went on for minutes, others claim it lasted for hours. Servants outside the room didn't know what to do. Was the king in distress? Or simply in a good mood? Then everything went quiet. No one knows exactly what happened next. The records from that night are vague. There was no royal physician's report, no official witness account. Only the tale passed down through whispers, chroniclers, and stories retold. One version says the king fell from his bed, unable to breathe, and collapsed on the floor. Another says he clutched his chest in the middle of laughter and suddenly stopped moving. A few even suggest he died mid-laugh, a smile still on his face. Whatever the truth may be, he never got back up. There were no cries for help, no royal alarms, just silence and the stunned expressions of those who found him. Some claimed it was the laughter that killed him. Others believed it was his poor health, or maybe a heart attack triggered by the intense strain. A few whispered about poison or foul play, but one thing remained constant in all the versions: the joke and the laughter. It was a strange, almost poetic way to go. A powerful king brought down not by war or betrayal or disease, but by a single joke told in a quiet room. Even today, more than 600 years later, this bizarre death still captures the imagination. Was it real? Was it just a legend? Historians debate the details, medical experts try to explain it, but the story has lasted because it feels almost impossible, and yet somehow true. The king who died of laughter, a tale so strange it refuses to be forgotten. Stories of kings dying from laughter sound almost too absurd to be real, and maybe they are. Many historians believe that the tale of King Martin's death is more myth than fact, a legend born from whispers in royal courts, a tale passed down through generations, not as official history, but as a moral lesson or a dark joke about the unpredictability of life. After all, medieval chroniclers often exaggerated or invented details to teach values or entertain nobles, and the idea of a king, powerful, respected, feared, dying from something as silly as a joke. That's the kind of story that spreads fast, not because it's accurate, but because it's unforgettable. But what if there was some truth in it? Let's start with the setting. Martin had just finished a heavy meal. Records mention he had eaten a whole goose by himself. He was already struggling with indigestion, and he wasn't in great health to begin with. Reports suggest he was overweight, aging, and possibly suffering from urinary or kidney issues in his later years. So when his jester arrived to lighten the mood and told that bizarre joke about a deer being punished for stealing figs, something strange happened. Martin reportedly broke into uncontrollable laughter. Not a short chuckle, a long, unstoppable fit. Then he suddenly collapsed, unresponsive, dead. It sounds dramatic, yes, but not entirely impossible. Modern medicine has documented rare cases of what's called death by laughter. It's not common, but it does happen. There's a condition known as elastic syncope, a sudden fainting episode triggered by laughter. In some people, this can lead to a drop in blood pressure, loss of consciousness, and in rare cases, death. Combine that with a weak heart, poor health, or a respiratory problem, and it becomes even more dangerous. Laughter can also trigger cardiac arrest, especially in individuals with heart disease or undiagnosed arrhythmias. If the diaphragm contracts too forcefully, it can interrupt normal heart rhythm or breathing. Some people have even experienced asphyxiation, essentially suffocating due to intense laughter when air fails to reach the lungs fast enough. Another possibility, uremic coma, a complication that can arise from kidney failure. If Martin's kidneys were already failing, the stress from a large meal and sudden excitement might have pushed his body past its limits. His laughter wouldn't have been the cause, but the final trigger. Some even speculate poisoning. One theory mentions a possible political rival, Lorenzo Valla, who might have had something to gain from Martin's sudden death. But there's no solid evidence to support this, only rumors that later historians echoed. Still, these theories remain exactly that, theories, because no autopsy was ever done, no medical records were kept. What we have is a mixture of chroniclers, court gossip, and modern medical guesswork, and King Martin wasn't the only person in history said to have died laughing. The Greek philosopher Chrysippus, in the 3rd century BC, supposedly laughed himself to death after seeing a donkey eat figs and then ordering wine for it. In Renaissance Italy, the satirist Pietro Aretino was said to have died laughing while reading one of his own dirty jokes aloud. And in 17th century Scotland, Thomas Urquhart, a polymath and nobleman, is believed to have collapsed from joy and laughter upon hearing that Charles II had taken the throne. These stories, like Martin, sit somewhere between fact and fiction. They fascinate because they mix humor with horror, life with death, power with absurdity, and maybe that's why the story of King Martin I survived all these centuries, not because it's fully true, but because it reveals something deeper about the fragility of life. Even the most powerful man in a kingdom can be brought down by a joke. When King Martin I of Aragon took his final breath on May 31st, 1410, the kingdom was thrown into uncertainty. He left behind no legitimate heir. His only son, Martin the Younger, had died 5 years earlier. That meant the royal line of the House of Barcelona, which had ruled for over 500 years, came to an abrupt end. And with it, the unity of the crown of Aragon was suddenly at risk. Nobles, advisors, and rival claimants scrambled to secure the throne. For nearly 2 years, the kingdom had no crowned king. This period of power vacuum is now known as the interregnum of Aragon. It wasn't just a political delay, it was a dangerous time with multiple noble families pushing their candidates. Civil war seemed a real possibility. Eventually, the crisis was settled not by sword, but by negotiation. In 1412, 5 judges met in the city of Caspi to decide who would rule. Their choice fell on Ferdinand of Antequera, a cousin of Martin and a prince from the powerful Trastamara dynasty of Castile. His rise to the throne was called the Compromise of Caspi, and it changed the future of Spain forever. But while the politics moved forward, Martin's strange death didn't disappear. Instead, it grew into something larger than a footnote. The story of a king who laughed himself to death found a life of its own, spreading through medieval chronicles, whispered in taverns, and later retold in books of strange facts. Some writers turned it into a moral tale, a warning against gluttony, or a reflection on how even the most powerful can be brought down by something as silly as a joke. Others treated it as a curiosity, placing Martin on lists of people who died in strange ways alongside ancient philosophers and eccentric nobles. But modern historians see it differently. They believe the death by laughter story is likely a legend, possibly created or exaggerated after his death to add drama or irony. After all, Martin had been suffering from chronic health issues, obesity, gout, and digestive problems, and his sudden death could have been from heart failure or stroke. Yet the timing of the joke, the image of a king laughing uncontrollably until he dies, was too memorable to forget. It stuck today. King Martin's unusual ending appears in countless trivia books, historical podcasts, and online articles. His tale is told alongside those of Chrysippus, the Greek philosopher who supposedly died laughing at his own donkey, and Pietro Aretino, the Italian writer, said to have died from laughing at an obscene joke. But Martin's case stands out not just because he was a king, but because his death came at a time of real importance. It wasn't just a bizarre, and it helped shape the future of kingdoms. The moment the crown slipped from Martin's head, began to drift towards something new, and the joke that caused it, or perhaps didn't, would never quite be forgotten. So did King Martin of Aragon really die from laughter? It's hard to say for sure. Some believe the joke told by his jester was simply the final spark, igniting a fatal mix of poor health, indigestion, and exhaustion. Others see it as nothing more than a legend built up over time to give a strange death a memorable twist. What's certain is that the story stuck. This is how history often works. A single event, half true, half tale, gets passed from one generation to the next, and somewhere along the way the line between fact and folklore begins to blur. Laughter is something we all know. It's safe, familiar, joyful. But in Martin's case, if the legend is to be believed, it became something deadly. And that's what makes this story so haunting. If a king could be brought down by a joke, what does that say about the power of the body, the weight of a crown, and the stories we choose to remember. Now we want to hear from you. Do you think Martin really died of laughter? And do you know any other strange deaths from history? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed the tale, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to History Screen, where the past tells its story.